I love when people make things, whether it's ideas or whether products, like you or both. And I travel all over the country, and I'm just seeing an amazing renaissance in this country everywhere I go. And so it's a really exciting time, I think, to be in manufacturing. We talked about this last night about what's really happening in this country, and it's an untold story. It really is about the renaissance in manufacturing in this country, which I think is just really at the beginning stages. And I want to kind of put this in a context of why this is happening. So let me tell you a little bit about one of the industries that I've been covering for the last 4 years. That has been an incredibly exciting thing to cover, and that is the energy industry. And when I talk about energy, I'm not talking about wind and solar power and green energy. I'm talking about the oil and gas industry, which is, if you look over the last 5 years, the oil and gas industry, about half of the growth of the U.S. economy is attributable to the boom that's going on in this country in oil and gas. And a lot of you are, I'm sure, aware of this. The story is out now. When I started talking about this a few years ago, people, weren't really aware of what's really happening in our energy industry around this country. But it is an astonishing thing to see. And I always like to start the story by telling about trip I took about a little over 2 years ago to the great state of North Dakota. I always say I've been to every continental state in the United States. I've never been to Alaska, Hawaii, but I've been to every continental state multiple times, but I'd never been to North Dakota. So the first lesson I learned, because I went there almost 2 years ago, you don't want to go to North Dakota in January. I don't think it got above 0 degrees the entire 4 days I was there. But it's an incredible thing that's going on there. I went to this little town of Williston, North Dakota. I don't know if any of you ever heard of Williston, but Williston sits atop of the Bakken Shale. It's just ground zero for the Bakken Shale drilling that's going on. And you go to Williston, and what it feels like is like what it must have been during the 19th century during the gold rush in California. It is just unbelievable, the growth that's going on there. It is like boomtown USA. This is a town that used to have 5,000 or 6,000 wheat farmers. Now you go there, they don't know what the population is, 20, 25,000, more and more people coming in every day. I had to spend over $300 to stay at a Best Western hotel in Williston, North Dakota, because there's just literally nowhere to stay. The truckers sleep in their rigs. It's booming so much. It's an astonishing thing to see the amount of prosperity there. And everybody's getting rich off of this. Anybody who owns land, they're leasing their land, and they're getting oftentimes, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to lease their wheat farm for drilling. And it's kind of a fun experience. I spent a bunch of time with the geologist who explained to me how this is happening. You're standing out there in the middle of a wheat field, out in the middle of the Great Plains, in the middle of nowhere, nothing in sight. You're standing next to a big oil rig. And it's this is such a tribute to American ingenuity and American know-how and inventiveness that we now have the capacity to drill 3 miles deep into the ground, which I find to be an awesome thought. And then because of this new technology called horizontal drilling, I don't know how many of you have heard of horizontal drilling, but it's a spectacular improvement. And what it means is they can go 3 miles deep, and then like a spider web, these rigs can go in any direction, which makes them incredibly more productive. And then, of course, the other big game-changing technology is fracking and hydraulic fracturing, which is, just to put it very simply, one of the great innovations of the last 50 years. And so the neat thing about fracking, I don't know how much you know about fracking, but I spent some time with them, and it's an incredible thing because, this oil and gas in North Dakota, it's not just in North Dakota, it's happening all over the country. It's encased in the shale rock, which is extremely thick and dense. It's like an armor plate. And that oil and gas has been trapped there for millions of years, right? But we never had the capacity. We knew it was there, but we never had the capacity to get at it. And so what they do with fracking is they're emitting at very rapid pace huge amounts of water and chemicals and sand into that rock. And then they finally crack through with these tiny perforations, tiny holes. And once they do, they expand the holes, and it's like taking a champagne bottle and shaking it up and taking the cork off it. That oil and gas that's been stored there for millions of years flows up to the top of these wells, and it's just an incredible process. And so the bottom line on this is, ladies and gentlemen, because of fracking and horizontal drilling, and by the way, the technology keeps getting better and better and better with this literally every month, and we're way, way ahead of the rest of the world in this. That's the other kind of neat thing. The rest of the world is way behind us in terms of these new technologies. They're trying, these countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, they're trying to figure out fracking so they can do it too, but our technology is so much better than theirs. Well, because of this technology, to cut to the chase, ladies and gentlemen, there's more oil in North Dakota than there is in Saudi Arabia. Now, that's an amazing thing to think about. And it's not just happening in North Dakota. It is happening all over this country. I was in another trip I took recently, Midland, Texas. Anyone ever been to Midland, Texas? Midland is the fastest growing medium-sized. It's even growing faster than Grand Rapids, right? It is unbelievable, the growth there. Texas, just to give you an example of what's happening with our oil production, Texas in 5 years has tripled its oil output. Tripled it. In 5 years? That's phenomenal. It's happening in Oklahoma. It's happening even California. The land of fruits and vegetables. I mean, they are now, they've got Governor Jerry Brown, Governor Moonbeam there, and they just passed a law allowing fracking because they're sitting on $2 trillion worth of oil and gas in California. It's happening in West Virginia. It's happening. How many of you heard of the Marcellus Shale? I mean, everyone has, right? The Marcellus Shale is an unbelievable energy find. There's 150 years worth of natural gas in the Marcellus Shale. 150 years worth. We've been hearing for 50 years, right? America is running out of oil and gas. We are not running out of oil and gas. We're running into it. We're running into it. And this is a phenomenal thing. And we've got literally hundreds of years of availability of this resource. So it's a great story. The bottom line here is simply this, that within 7 or 8 years, by the year 2020, the United States of America will move from being an energy import country to an energy export country. Now, that is an awesome thing to think about. I mean, think about how that completely changes the dynamics of the U.S. economy and also just the geopolitical situation around the world. If this is true, that we start exporting this stuff rather than importing it on net. First of all, what is the number one thing Americans import more of than anything else from the rest of the world? Oil, right? We spend about $300 billion a year as a nation importing this stuff, which is a net drain on our economy, right? So think about what it just means for jobs and so on if we can produce it rather than having to buy it. Second of all, think about how this changes our national security interests around the world. Where do we get our oil from? Well, we get a lot of it obviously from Canada and Mexico, but we also get a lot of our oil from OPEC countries, from countries like Iran, countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like Venezuela, that are hostile to the United States and our national security interests. If we don't have to send money to them, that changes the whole geopolitical situation, especially with respect to the Middle East. They become, the Middle East has just been a hornet's nest for 50 years now. And if we're not dependent on their energy resources, I think it just changes the whole the game there. So it's an exciting thing. Now, why have I been spending time telling you about this? Not just to brag about what's happening with our oil industry, which is great. By the way, those jobs in the oil and gas industry, we're talking about jobs that the average job in the oil and gas industry pays $75,000 to $80,000 a year. The average job. But, if you go to North Dakota, you go to Midland, Texas, and you're a competent, well-trained welder, you can make $80,000 to $100,000 a year. So these are and a lot of them are union jobs, so there's no reason to be against this with respect to the economic impact. North Dakota's unemployment rate is officially 3%. That's a bald-faced lie. Actually, North Dakota has a negative unemployment rate. They have more jobs than they have people. Why does this matter to you all? What has happened, because the United States of America has this energy renaissance, is that guess what nation in the world today has the lowest power costs of all industrialized countries that we compete with? The United States. We are the lowest power cost country. We have the lowest cost of electricity of any country in the world. And that is a huge competitive advantage to us. Not just because of electric power, but many of you use oil and gas in the products that you, as a feeder to the products that you provide. And so this is an enormous competitive advantage that it gives the United States. There was a great story in our paper about a month ago about 4 or 5 major German companies. And when you talk about Germany, Germany is the only economy that works in Europe right now, right? Germany. And when you think about Germany, what do you think about? German engineering, right? That's what they're famous for. These German companies like BMW are saying they're moving plants out of Germany and they're moving them. Guess where they're moving them? Here to the United States. Now, that's insourcing, right? That's insourcing of jobs. For the last 40 years, we've been outsourcing manufacturing jobs. Now we're insourcing them. And you know what the number one reason these German companies said they wanted to move to the United States was? Anybody want to take a guess? Energy costs. Energy costs are so much lower in the United States than Germany that they can substantially reduce their final costs by moving here, which is an extraordinary thing to think about. And it's such a great situation. Germany, by the way, has moved for 20 years into this fad of green energy, right? Oh, we're gonna power our country with windmills and solar panels and so on. It just completely went bust. Their power costs went through the roof. Ours have gone down. It's an amazing story. One other quick little point about this is that for those of you who are concerned about global warming, I'm not a big global warming guy, but if you are and you're concerned about carbon emissions, just a little story that hasn't gotten out there much is, of all the industrialized countries in the world, guess what nation has reduced its carbon emissions the most in the last 3 years? Anybody want to take a guess? We have. So what's happened in the United States is because of the fracking boom and the oil and gas boom, we are increasingly using natural gas for electricity production, right? And so what are we doing? We're moving towards natural gas away from coal. But they're extremely competitive, and what's happened is that natural gas is winning out because it's so cheap right now in the United States. And that transition from coal, which is more of a dirty fuel, to natural gas, which is a clean and abundant fuel, is actually reducing our carbon emissions. So that's a great part of the story as well. So the kind of neat thing is we're seeing this manufacturing, this impact of lower energy costs on manufacturing, on transportation, on the petrochemical industry is going gangbusters in this country because oil and gas are major inputs in terms of producing chemicals in this country. And it's causing this, I shouldn't say causing, it's facilitating this amazing boom that business is good, and I think this is part of the story. So that's very good news.